Where Michael Vick goes, protesters are sure to follow. We'll speak to a member of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, when this ESPN News special continues.
Dan Shannon is a spokesman for PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and he joins us now on ESPN News. Dan, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
How many people from PETA were on hand at the courthouse today in Richmond, Virginia?
Well, we had about 150 people out here today, out here at the trial. We were holding posters that said, prosecute all dog fighters, and we just want to make sure people don't lose sight of the fact that whether or not Michael Vick is guilty or innocent, dog fighting doesn't end with him. There's 40,000 professional dog fighters out there in the United States of America who need to be brought to justice.
Now, Dan, we understand that protests on a Nike Town next week are still set to go on, but hasn't Nike already stopped its release of a new Vick shoe?
They have, but they've also stated directly to us that they plan to continue to sell Michael Vick merchandise after this all blows over. We don't feel that that's acceptable. The fact that 66 dogs were seized from his property, the level of injuries that they had, and all the equipment that was seized, those are all facts that are not going to change based on the outcome of this trial. We feel like those facts alone are enough for Nike to distance themselves from Michael Vick.
Well, aren't you then convicting Michael Vick in the court of public opinion without some sort of legal decision?
I don't think so. You know, it's up to the courts to decide if he's guilty or not of these charges. But again, the facts won't change. At the very least, he's guilty of extreme negligence for letting this take place on his property, even if we take his story at face value that he had no idea that it was going on. That should be enough for some sort of reprimand from the league and from Nike.
Well, Dan, how do you balance a scheduled series of protests against the argument that Michael Vick hasn't been found guilty of any criminal charge?
Well, again, you know, whatever happens in the court of law won't change the fact that these dogs were found on his property, that they did have injuries consistent with dogfighting, and that there was all this illegal equipment. Those facts aren't going to change, and we feel that those facts speak for themselves. It's up to the courts to decide if he's guilty or innocent of a crime, but everybody knows that something wrong was going on at Michael Vick's property.
Well, could PETA then be accused here of taking advantage of the platform provided by the Vick case to advance his own agenda?
Well, I think if there's a silver lining to this whole mess, it is that people are learning more about the issue of dogfighting. They're learning what sort of telltale signs they should look for in animals in their community. They're learning that they can contact the police department or the sheriff's department if they feel like it might be taking place. You know, there is some positive that we can pull from this whole thing, and that's educating people about this cruel and inhumane blood sport.
Well, Dan, what was PETA doing before Michael Vick? What was PETA doing about dogfighting?
Well, we shot a PSA, a public service announcement about dogfighting with former heavyweight champ Lamont Brewster that we've aired on stations across the country. We offer rewards in local dogfighting cases for information that can lead to a successful prosecution. We distribute information and literature in local communities to raise awareness about dogfighting. This is something we've been involved with behind the scenes for years. Michael Vick has obviously just thrust this issue into the public consciousness.
Should Michael Vick be found guilty, what would be PETA's public reaction?
Well, we would be glad that somebody, whether they're a famous NFL quarterback or not, is held accountable for the crime of dogfighting. We feel like that's what should happen to anybody who is guilty of this crime. It's not up to us to decide if he's guilty or not, but if he is found guilty, justice will have been done.
Dan, take us into I don't want to say a boardroom meeting, but some sort of PETA meeting. I mean, in all seriousness, how do you structure a series of scheduled protests and say, okay, we're going to have so many people here, and then there's going to be this announcement at this courthouse, we'll have X number of people there. How do you orchestrate all that?
Well, we have local activists and members and supporters on the ground in all the cities where we have these Nike Town stores that we're protesting. We get a hold of them, and then they get the wheels rolling to mobilize local folks in their communities. This demonstration at the courthouse was organized from PETA headquarters. We had a contingent of folks who came up to Richmond from Norfolk, which is about an hour and a half away, to lead this event, and we were joined by, like I said, 150 local people to help us out. So it's a multifaceted effort that involves local people, people from PETA headquarters, volunteers, staff across the board.
Dan, we've got an ESPN poll question out there, and it reads as follows. Do you think Michael Vick will serve jail time for these dogfighting charges? 60% of those who logged on say yes. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I agree with that 60%. The federal government has a 97% conviction rate, and these are pretty serious charges that he's being faced with. I think it's almost certain that he's going to spend time in prison.
Dan Shannon from PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals from Richmond, Virginia. Dan, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.